vet rehabbers, welcome to our
Hi.
Facebook Live. Hey Morgan, thanks so much for joining me.
Hi. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation.
So Morgan is a veterinarian and she is here today to talk to us about underwater treadmill and horses. And this is a topic that I'm really, really interested in. So I have experience in using an underwater treadmill for dogs and cats, and I think I've had a rabbit or two in there. But I've never actually seen or been present with a horse in an underwater treadmill. And to be honest, the idea actually really freaks me out a little bit. I mean, I just worry, horses are a little bit more unpredictable than dogs. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, Morgan.
Yeah.
So for those of you that are live with us, thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions for Morgan, please post them in the comments. Throughout our talk today, we're going to be answering all your questions. So looking forward to hearing all the things that you guys are interested in. If you're listening to this as a recording, you can still ask us questions, and Morgan will come back afterwards just to answer any of them. So yeah, looking forward to this chat. So for those of you that are interested in equine veterinary rehabilitation, we have an awesome Facebook group called the Equine Vet Rehabbers. We will post the link to this in the comments. So please come and join us there. It's a really awesome community there that chats about everything about equine veterinary rehabilitation. So we'd love to have you guys there. So Morgan, as a start, won't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the field of equine veterinary rehabilitation?
Yeah. So I graduated in 2009 at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. And I've been a competitive dressage rider all my life. And that gave me like the experience with horses that sometimes, horses have a little bit of poor performance. They're not really obviously lame or obviously sick, but it's just poor performance. And I always felt that I wanted to be able to do more than just general vet work. So I was already interested in chiropractic work and osteopathic work as a student. So I studied osteopathy when I was still also in vet school. And after vet school, I did the chiropractic course, focus on the equine spine. And during my studies, I really liked the whole rehab part, and I felt that it was really in school there's not so much attention and not so much time involved with the whole rehab stuff. I think it should be more already in the university, but I was always really interested in it. And after graduation, I first went to Sweden and lived there for 3 years. And then when I came back to the Netherlands, I started working at an equine clinic that had a rehab center. And I worked there. And after a couple of years, they decided to sell the rehab center, and I took it over. So then I had my own rehab center, which was always kind of my dream. So I didn't expect it to happen so soon. And then I do have to say that I really I learned a lot and I enjoyed it a lot. But there was one point that I didn't expect, that there was so much work just outside the vet work. There was a lot of managing work and like the staff issues, and I didn't really expected that, and I didn't really think about it. And I felt that I was a little bit better in just working like mostly vet work with rehab. So last year I sold the rehab facility, and I still work there as a vet every Monday. So now for me it's perfect. I can work with the rehabilitation and with the underwater treadmill, but I'm a little bit more free and I can be doing a little bit more what I want. So and then I also did the CERP last year, and I'm part of the equine hydrotherapy work group since last year as well. So yeah.
Awesome. I think that's a common thing that a lot of us have, So, I mean, I think a lot of us got into the field, and I think it goes with vets, vet nurses, lots of people, they get into the field because they actually want to do the work, right?
Yeah.
Then, we say, oh, we can have our own business, and then we have to do all that management side, and we don't want to be doing that. We want to be treating animals and do all the fun stuff,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let's chat a bit about underwater treadmill. I mean, this is something that is so foreign to me with horses. I mean, obviously know about it, but I just the idea of putting the horse in a very confined space it freaks me out a little bit, to be honest. So like I worry about, I think like, how do you control them? You know, horses in the best of times are difficult to control, you know, and we know that they sometimes will do things and you're like, whoa, what's just happened, you know? So like, how is it in comparison to obviously putting a dog? It's a lot smaller, you can control it. How is it putting such a large animal into a confined space like an underwater treadmill?
Yeah, I think of course there's more risks involved with a horse than compared to a dog. But I think I'm always surprised at how fast they learn and how much most horses like the underwater treadmill. But you just need to take time for the acclimatization and just that they are relaxed. And if you feel that the horse is really tensed, and then especially with horses that come for rehab, I don't want them to do any uncontrolled movement, so then I would give them a light sedation for the first times. But I have to say, in general, horses cope really well, just as long as you give them time. So we break it up in steps. The whole acclimatization strategy is in steps. So the first we walk on the belt and let them see, and of course now I'm talking about an above ground unit, because the in-ground units are a little bit different, because there's always water in there. But I always like to just that they go over the belt and just stand on the belt and go off, and just that they are relaxed doing that, and then we close, and then they can hear the sounds. And then I feel that the part that's most difficult is when you start the belt and they feel the ground moving and they have to find their balance. And I have to say, with like 95% of all the horses, as soon as they feel the water, they get in a nice rhythm. So I tend to start with the water quite soon, just to the coronary band, so not high water, but so that they feel the water, and then you can see them immediately getting more in a better rhythm and in a better posture. And it depends a little bit per horse. It's also, of course, depending on what the issue is with the horse. Why is the horse coming for the water treadmill training? But some horses that are healthy and balanced, they can just walk on right away. I've seen horses that just walk on right away without losing their balance and without losing their rhythm. And then, of course, some horses that already have some balance issues, they find it more, they have a little bit more difficulties. But I think, of course, some things happen. But if you really take your time for the first sessions and make sure that the horse is relaxed, and you have to have a good team and communicate well with your team so that everyone knows what they're doing, then I think it's you can really do it safely. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think this is quite similar to the way in which we do it with dogs, because we do exactly the same thing. So we'll walk them through the treadmill times, and then, you know, let them listen to sounds. Very, very, very similar. And I'm guessing, obviously, with horses, a lot of the horses that you're treating used to walking into something confined. So, I mean, is it mainly competition horses that you're treating, or, I mean, they have to obviously get to the facility, so they would have had to be in a horse box or some confined space.
Yeah, so most of them are used to a horse box, and I would say we treat like some young horses, but most of them are riding horses. Not all of them are competition horses, because some people just really want the best for their horse, and not even like some riders are not competition riders, but they still want the best training for their horse or best rehab for their horse. But most of them are used to horse box, and it depends a little bit. Like we have a ramp in the front and in the back of the unit, and some horses that are just they're only know a horse box and not like a truck. They don't know how to offload from the front. So sometimes we learn them, and I've had like I think 2 or 3 horses that were really, really tensed with offloading from the front. And then we would just offload them from the back like you would do in a horse box. So that's also, if you feel that there might be a risk that the horse is going to jump from the ramp, then you can just offload them like in a horse box as well, so from the back. Yeah. But
if there's anyone listening, if you guys have any questions, please fire away in the comments. Morgan is here to answer all our questions about underwater treadmill. Morgan, have you ever had a horse that is completely freaked out in the underwater treadmill, or like try to jump out?
Well, I have to say, knock on wood, I haven't had any jump out. I had one horse that didn't understand the belt, that he had to walk on the belt, so he would just sit on the bar on the back of the unit, and we really couldn't, like with most horses, you can stimulate them either with your hands or with your voice, or we always have a whip just in case, that we can keep them forward. As long as they stay forward, then it's usually no problem. But this horse just completely shut down, and that one is the only one that I took off and said, okay, this one I'm not gonna, because I couldn't get into him. And I've had one horse, then the unit wasn't even on yet, it was just standing still, and he went under the bar with his bum, like sometimes happens in a horse box as well. And that's the only like freak accident that I've had, that he went under the belt and he started bucking towards the bar. Sorry, not the belt, but the bar. But that's the only two in like hundreds of horses that we've had that I've had problems with. Otherwise, they as long as you you have to always keep working together with your team, communicating well, make sure that your environment is as quiet as possible, and instruct the owners. That's also a very, very important part, because especially with the first sessions, like some owners, as soon as the horse goes onto the water treadmill, they're there with their camera and they're like in the face of the horse, and they like sometimes with flashlights, and I'm like, no, I really like the owners to, if the owner is really tensed, then sometimes I ask the owner to just step outside, and then that they come back later if the horse is relaxed, or that they come back with the next session. But some horses pick up the tension of the owners, and if the owner is quite relaxed, then they can stay, but they have to stay in a specific spot where the horse can see them, and they just have to stand still, not make any strange movements. And then as soon as the horse relaxes and is in his rhythm, then the owner can join us and can stand beside us or whatever. But in the beginning, you want the environment controlled and quiet, so that, because the horse really needs to focus on the belt and this different motion that he's feeling. And if there's too many things going on around him, you'll see that it gets more risky. Yeah.
And are the handlers and the people that are dealing with the horse, are they wearing like protective gear, like helmets and things, or was that overkill?
Well, I have to say, we had a discussion yesterday with the equine hydrotherapy work group that it's a little bit different per country. So in Great Britain, it's quite standard that everyone has a helmet on. I would say in the Netherlands, it's not so usual. Also, not when you're just handling a horse. So in the moment, they're only using helmets in riding, but not with lunging or handling horses. But in Great Britain, it would be very normal to have a helmet on. So it depends a little bit on the country. So some countries do have it standard that they have a helmet on, and some countries don't. Yeah.
And so the type of horses that you're seeing are obviously ones that have ailments and injuries that you're rehabilitating. Are you also seeing performance horses that are just there for like cross training? In small animals, obviously our performance dogs and agility dogs, sometimes they'll come just to do some underwater treadmill for some just general strengthening, not because they actually have an injury.
Yeah, no, we do see them, and I think it's not so known with some owners, and I think it's really good for some horses to have cross training, especially with the dressage horses. So because of my background, I work a lot with dressage horses as well, and they tend to train every day the same thing. So it's they need to have variation in their training schedule. So the water treadmill training is a great way to vary in the schedule, because you can train the balance and actually the quality of the walk, because I think especially in dressage horses, it's not so easy to train the walk. And on the water treadmill, they really get a really nice walk in rhythm, and because of the sensation of the water and the proprioceptive feedback, they usually tend to increase the quality of the walk, and especially also, I think in the to get some more lumbar flexion and to get the hind limb under more, especially also in dressage horses, can be sometimes difficult for the riders to train under saddle. And some horses, you don't want to have a rider on their back every day, especially if it's a horse that is quite easily sensitive in his back. So then it's a great way to have an unridden exercise that you can still have great, you can increase the range of motion from the spine, you can increase the range of motion from the limbs, you train the balance and the coordination. So it's a great basic training, and I think for dressage horses this can also be a little bit more specific training. So I think it's a great way to do cross training in for most disciplines, but especially for dressage horses.
And the performance riders are quite open to this. I mean, they'd be prepared to box their horse to a facility to use the underwater treadmill.
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit per rider and per country as well. What we see in the Netherlands is that most of the professional riders have water treadmill themselves, which is good. But the only thing that concerns me is that the people working with the water treadmill then in their facility are not always the people that are trained like really well. So that's the thing that concerns me. And then, like in Great Britain, you'll see that sometimes the riders they go to the facility. So, like a very famous example is Vallegro, who always goes to Harpury, the underwater treadmill in Harpury, and they just go there. I think more horses of Charlotte and Carl Hester are going there. So I think they go there twice a week with a couple of horses, and they say we really like the professionals to do it. So I quite like that. That's that way of thinking. But the only downside for them, of course, is that they have to truck the horses towards the facility. But they're not so far from that facility, so for them it's not a big thing. So in the Netherlands, you'll see more often that they would like to have the unit at their own facility, but then the groom is usually working it, and that can be, it depends a little bit on the background of the groom, how well the training on the water treadmill is for the horses. So that can be a concern in general. Yeah.
Potentially some safety issues there. If the We've got a question for you. So Greg Neal asked, does Dr. Lashley see benefit in using a heart rate monitor on horses working on the water treadmill, since it's not really taxing? So I'm going to just read it again because it doesn't all read there. Yeah. Does Dr. Lashley see benefit in using a heart rate monitor on horses working on the water treadmill, since not really taxing on the cardiovascular system?
Yeah, actually I do still, because it is aerobic training, so the heart rate doesn't go up as high. I think in general, if I only work the horses in walk at the water treadmill, so we usually see a heart rate somewhere between 60 and 75 or something like that. But the thing is that I have had some horses that have, for example, pain, and that would they would change their behavior. And then sometimes if we have the heart rate monitor on, you could also see a change in their heart rate. And there was nothing from the outside. There were no stimuli from external stimuli or something. And it would just be like pain or discomfort from the body. So sometimes it can give you more information, especially in rehab horses, in monitoring them and seeing if you're not overloading them. But it's not like, some horses will still look normal in the heart rate and they still think it's a tough job. So it's not, you cannot just trust on the heart rate. You still need to look at the horse and the way it's moving and its posture and things like that. But I do think it can be of a nice way of monitoring and just looking at how the horse is responding on the training. Yeah, so I wouldn't use it every session, but I would make sure that you use it regularly. Yeah.
Thanks, Morgan. Great question, Greg. Greg's got another question. How does Dr. Lashley monitor muscle fatigue for fit horses, sport horses on the water treadmill, as many horses can easily handle 20, 30, 40 minutes on the treadmill and don't always show major signs of fatigue, like during ridden work or lunging? Any special tricks besides monitoring movement pattern, stress, etc.?
Yeah, I would say that's a very good question and a difficult question, because I think so it's generally it's the motion patterns, the movement pattern, how they walk, but also behavior in general. So if they start like some horses I've seen that they start licking their mouth all of a sudden, or they start lacking a little, or staying behind on the belt a little bit, or they are changing their head neck position, or they are biting in the rope. So there can be a lot of behavioral things that can that can show that they're getting fatigued. And I think a most important thing is, especially in the first sessions, that you do a really good intake. So I always check the horses first over ground, just in on a straight line and on the circle, and at least in a walk. And it depends on the horse, but also in a trot. And then I always, with the first sessions, I say to the owner that they have to check the horse, that the horse doesn't change in his movement pattern, that he's not reacting on the brushing all of a sudden, that he's not looking stiff. And even because in the first sessions, we don't go, like the first session we would usually go like somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes, and we would build up from there. And with most horses, I usually go to 20 to 25 minutes max. And I think I think in general, also with the hydrotherapy work group, we feel that a 25-minute workout on the water treadmill session, like a session, is like at least the same intensity as a normal workout on the saddle. So you don't have to go to like 45-60 minutes on the water treadmill. It can be much shorter. But I think so the movement pattern is very important, but behavior is also very important. So if the horse started changing behavior or a change in heart rate, then it's really red flags, and you have to either change the level of the water or the time or the speed. And if it doesn't improve, then just take the horse off again of the treadmill.
Thanks, Morgan. Morgan, in equine rehabilitation, do you use ground treadmills as well as underwater treadmills?
Yeah. So the dry treadmills, you mean?
Yeah. So like at your facility, did you have a dry treadmill as well as an underwater treadmill?
Yeah, we did. And with the dry treadmill, we could do also a little bit of uphill training. So, but we couldn't trot them. So it was only walk. So I have to say, especially with horses that are, because the great thing about a treadmill is that you can have controlled exercise, and which is one of the most important things I think in rehab for horses, is that the horses stay controlled, because if they explode while hand walking and they run away and they injure themselves or the handler, can be a risk. So sometimes just controlled exercise is already a big thing for the rehab, and you can do that either on the dry treadmill or on the underground water treadmill. But I think I tend to have them on the water treadmill, because you have all the good things about the water that can help them with the hydrostatic pressure and just the proprioceptive input, and help them in the coordination and balance. And of course, if you have more severely injured horses, then you could have like high buoyancy with high water levels. I have to say that with the overground water treadmills, I don't really go really high in the water level. But for me, I wouldn't put a horse on the water treadmill if it's not sound in walk. That's like the first thing, that they need to be sound in walk before they can go on the water treadmill or on the dry treadmill. Yeah.
So what would be the most common water level that you'd be using then?
I think for now, I would say somewhere above fetlock to carpus height. So I usually don't really go higher than carpus height. Some horses go a little bit lower. It also depends on the rest of the horse, because what I think is important is that when you have a horse with an injury, but you keep looking at the whole horse, because it might be that the injury is like suspensory injuries, of course, one of the things that happen a lot. But some horses might have low cervical issues as well. And what I see with a lot of horses, as soon as the water level goes up, that they tend to go more in towards extension, because the protraction of the front limb gets tougher, and they help with their head and neck. And then sometimes they go really far in extension in the low cervical area. And in some horses, I really don't like that, especially if they're already sensitive in that area and if they already have problems in that area, which a lot of dressage horses have, unfortunately. So I don't like them to go too high, because then you'll get that extension posture, and you really want to have a more rounded posture. And so you have to see for the injury what type of height of water you want, and then you have to see how the horse moves in the water. And if the horse is not moving well in the rest of his body, then you have to adjust the water height. You cannot just think about the injury itself. Of course, you shouldn't be on a water level that is overloading the injury, but you have to make sure that the rest of the body is not overloading in the high water levels, especially the low cervical area. Yeah.
So it's a lot lower water levels than we're using in small animals. So in canine underwater treadmill, we generally a lot higher, like level of like the shoulder or hip in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And I think it's also a little bit different. Of course, the canines, we don't ride our dogs, so they don't have to be. They don't have the same kind of loading of their neck and back, and I think that's also what we want to have with the horse. We think about the posture, but it's also a little bit. I have to say, if I look to the units in the United States, usually they have in ground, and the water level is much higher. And you'll see, like if I see the horse that I've seen there, and the videos of horses that go in there, they go much more towards an extension posture. But it depends also a little bit, of course, on what your goal is. Like if you have a race horse, or if you really want the buoyancy, then you can say, okay, we just choose the buoyancy for now, and as soon as the horse improves, then we drop the water level again to also get the rest of the spine to be more optimal working. So it depends a little bit, of course, on what the reason is that the horse is going into the water. But I don't usually tend to go over carpus height of water.
I mean, walking in water is something that they've been doing in horses for quite a while. I mean, as a youngster, I can remember going to racing yards and them having those sort of circular kind of things where they basically walk into water, and then there's a thing that goes around and actually holds onto their head collar and makes them walk around. So it's something that horses, people have been doing for a long time, but obviously the underwater treadmill itself, you're obviously in a confined area and you can control a little bit more. Whereas with those kind of water walkers, the water is the same level. So depending on the size of the horse, you can't adjust that, right?
No. So I think there are some good things about the water treadmill, that of course it's confined, and the only thing, the downside of a water treadmill is that you have a belt. So like kinematically, the horse is not really walking in the same way as they would over ground. So the retraction is passive, and I think you have to really, with some injuries, you really have to keep that in mind, especially with navicular disease and deep digital flexor tendons, because in the retraction they might overload those areas and those tissues. But I think the good thing about the water treadmill is that when you can stand next to the horse, and you can really, not only can you control the speed and the water level, but you can also control their posture and like if they lean a little bit more towards the left, you can correct them. And if they, so you almost like if you would be a rider, you can really help them to correct them and work with them while they're on the water treadmill, and that you couldn't do that when they're on when they're far away from you, of course. And if something happens safety wise as well, you cannot do anything. So that's I think a good thing about the underwater treadmill, that you're much more able to control their posture and their way of walking and the safety.
So with some of the small animal underwater treadmills, we're actually able to incline them. Not all of them, but some of them have got inclines. So you don't have that with the equine one, right?
Well, there are some units that do have an uphill function as well, so that you can combine the water with the uphill function. The thing is that there are no studies yet from what the effects are on horses, and the the biggest concern now is that we are overloading the hind limbs, and especially the suspensories in the hind limbs when we have them, because they'll be in deeper water in the hind limbs when you have an uphill and they have to go uphill. So that's a big concern in the hydrotherapy work group as well. And we don't really have a lot of research data yet. So I think it would be great if we could have more knowledge on it from research. From now, I tend to be a little bit more careful. If I use the uphill, it would be on a dry treadmill, but not in the water.
Okay. Yeah. And because I mean, I don't really practice at all on horses. I am not really familiar with any research around the underwater treadmill on horses, but I know there is quite a bit of research in small animals. Is there any research in using the underwater treadmill in horses?
Yeah, there's been some research now. I think Harper University and Catherine Nankervis has been doing a lot of research. Melissa King from the United States has been doing a lot of research, and so there've been more and more research about it. So they've been looking at the stride length and stride frequency, range of motion from the spine, range of motion from the limbs. There has been one study from Dr. King about they have had carpal osteoarthritis, and then they looked at they made carpal osteoarthritis in the joint, and they had two groups, and one was just walked over ground, and the others were rehabilitated in the water treadmill. And what they found was there was less inflammation in the joint and less fibrosis in the joint, and especially that the horses had better postural stability, and they were also loading the injured limb better, so more higher ground reaction forces after a while than the control group had. So there have been a lot of kinematic studies, but also a couple of rehabilitation studies now. Yeah.
Okay, great. So obviously an underwater treadmill is quite a large investment for a vet rehab therapist. And you've obviously gone down that route, and you've had a practice, you've had one. Is it something that you'd recommend as a good return on investment for somebody who's doing, I suppose, primarily equine work,
Yeah, I think you're able to do so much more. So I think it's a good investment, and I wouldn't use it just for rehab. I would also try to get the cross training, so the healthy horses are healthy. Some of them are not completely healthy, but the owners don't really have big complaints. But I would say that it's better if you try to get both caseloads, so both your rehab cases and your training cases. And then, of course, you have to think about staff, because I think it's best if you operate with two people, especially in the first sessions. You need to be more than just you and the owner. And of course, it depends on what type of unit you want, and do you need to have a lot of excavation into the ground, and how big is your building, and is your building, do you own the building already, or do you need to hire a place? And with your staff as well, do you already have the staff, or do you need to hire people? So that all makes, of course, that I think it's good to look into that first before you make the decision. But there's, especially if you do both cross training and the rehab cases, you'll have plenty of horses and plenty of cases, and you can easily earn it back, I think.
Yeah. So, we know with horses, they're quite finicky, So like if a horse is going to have an injection, there's a chance that they could get an abscess. If you compare it, say, to cows, you inject a cow and it's all good, whereas horses are a lot more sensitive. So is water quality something that you really have to be like worried about? That they've got a small cut or something like that on the leg, that they get infections, or is that something that's not major?
No, it's important, and I think it depends a little bit. Like we use fresh water, so we use new water every time, but we use fresh water. But for me, like what our standard is that horses that have cuts or wounds, or that have pastern dermatitis that is acute, they don't go in the water. And if they've just been injected or if they have a wound that's been sutured, they don't go into the water. And if there's no problem, then they can go into the water. And especially if they go into regularly, then I always clean the limbs afterwards, but then we also disinfect the limbs. And I know of some facilities that they also put disinfectant into the water. And then it depends a little bit per facility and per unit if they use a diaper, if they use a diaper bag to collect the manure. I have to say, I try to not use them. It depends, of course, on the manufacturer of the machine if they recommend it or not. But the thing is that sometimes the horses change a little bit in the way they move as well when they have the diaper bag on them. So if you can do without, and sometimes the horses' kinematics are a little bit more normal. But it depends, of course. But we always clean the limbs afterwards, and especially the horses that go in regularly, we disinfect the limbs and we dry the limbs, and we. I have to say I didn't have any problems with dermatitis. The only thing that sometimes happens is if the frogs are not of a good quality, that you get thrush issues. So I always had already some stuff that you could use to increase the quality of the frog and really keep them dry and clean afterwards. But I wouldn't have a horse with cuts or wounds on the limbs into the water. No.
Yeah. So you said you're using new water. So is it cold water? So you don't heat it like in small ones?
No,
okay, cool.
No. So it's cold water. Yeah. Okay. And I think also in general, there has been a little bit of research on that topic as well. And they say they try to keep the water below 23 degrees Celsius. So usually our water would be between 10 and 15 degrees. Which makes it also like they can cool the limb right away as well, especially if there's an injury on the limbs. But they don't like the horses to be in too warm water as well, because they really need to work, and otherwise they have a little bit more problems on losing their body heat. So I don't think there's any facility that goes over 23 degrees Celsius in temperature for the water. Yeah.
Morgan, thank you. This has been so interesting for me. So I've learned so much now about underwater treadmill and horses. For those of you that are watching this as a recording, please, you're welcome to put your comments. Thank you for all the questions and comments that we've had, and for everyone who was here live with us. It's been awesome having you. And Morgan, we look forward to having you on Facebook again to chat about more stuff all about equine rehab.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.